the autumn, oceanside. The sole silhouette of a man, silent, motionless, before a brilliantined expanse of running ocean, a low-flying gull, a slow-passing boat on the near horizon, ribbons and threads of clouds tiered with pale blue, then deeper blue sky, laces of water music, caresses of cool sea wind, warm sand on the skin, serenity. Welcome to the latest Floating Poetry broadcast, and thank you for leaning in. Some of you newly, others once again, others listening in often. Appreciating you all. And here to show 142 in my ongoing weekly series, coming to you live from the wide horizon of the Rhode Island coast. This is your poet and poetorialist Colin Giedicke, a voice for living our days more fully, more alively, more poetically. Broadcast 141 was adventuring into your source, your essence, the place of our authentic selves, where they dwell beneath layers of cultural conditioning, social corseting, lost or forgotten connection. This week, what's on your horizon? The various horizons of your being, your inner life, your outer living, the horizons and sight lines you journey with, perceive, experience, feel about, are curious about, and two, what may be on our horizon as a world, as a culture, a society, a humanity. Maybe something radically different, transformational in the distance, in our way of being and relating to each other and to nature, in our individual and collective consciousness. What a remarkable time to be alive and seeing this opportunity, this potential becoming. So I've sourced cultural commentary, poetry, and inquiry, sourced and curated to bring attention and feeling and meaningful wondering to these horizons. And I've arranged these sharings and musings in part around respectively different kinds of horizons. So let's take our easels out with this poem here. On the Easel. Poem from Kiowa Island, South Carolina, May 1999. On the Easel. A chartreuse skirt of salt grass hemmed by ribbons of river flowing fast and west. Beyond the outer bank, more green meadow marsh smudged with sepia, ochre, and umber, stippled with cattails and flecked with zinc-white egrets. The half-land, half-waterscape stretches away to a hazy horizon line, a long layer of red cedar and yellow pine, then up into an island of clouds and clear egg-blue sky. On the Easel. From the Yucatan Peninsula, February 2000. Deus Ex Machina. Last night, when the moon was late, the radiant hand of a god reached down through the clouds, down below the dark horizon, up to his forearms, and, preceded by some glow, pulled out the tardy orb like a coin in his great and godly fingers, and, soon setting it in its proper place, the Olympian hand and arm withdrew. All too much mortal applause. Deus Ex Machina. Solomon Grundy by Alice Oswald. Born on Monday, and a tiny world-containing grain of light passed through each eye like heaven through a needle. And on Tuesday, he screamed for a small ear in which to hide. He rolled on Wednesday, rolled his whole body full of immense salt spaces, slowly from one horizon to the other. And on Thursday, trembling, crippled, broke beyond his given strength and crawled. And on Friday he stood upright. And on Saturday he tested a footstep, and the sky came down and alit on his shoulder, full of various languages in which one bird doesn't answer to another. And on Sunday he dreamed he was flying, and his mind grew gold watching the moon, and he began to sing to the brink of speaking. Thank you, Alice Oswald. That's Solomon Grundy from her collection Spacecraft Voyager 1. This is a poem for a friend back on his 60th birthday, years back, from the Pacific Northwest. When you were launched. And as you listen to this, maybe think what your story might be of your own launching and voyaging. One winter day, when the constellations whirled in white silence over the heads of your mother and father and everyone on earth, including those like you newly arriving, you were set afloat, gently but surely, onto a sea of infinite depth and possibility, with everything you needed for a lifelong voyage: a broad-beamed heart, a mercurial mind, and innocently open eyes. In a vessel that has wandered and weathered 5 decades well, from rocking and rolling through the 50s, to swinging through the 60s, to exploring waters new and far, bracing and embracing, up to present time, watershed time, with a spirit that has grown more buoyant and seaworthy from its seasons of seeing and feeling. A spirit that will light and guide and grace your passage through all the remarkable arcs, channels, and ports of call yet to come. Tourist Traps by Chase Twitchell. It's upstate New York in the 1950s, land of amusements, natural wonders like Ausable Chasm and High Falls Gorge, and tourist traps, kiddie parks like Land of Make-Believe, a castle with a dungeon, and train cars just wide enough for one kid. You can still see pink turrets through the trees, and under the eaves the papered lanterns of wasps. At 1,000 Animals you could drive a cart pulled by an ostrich, or pose for a Polaroid with a boa at the Serpentarium, then feed him a mouse, or watch boys in a pit milk snakes for venom. Nothing's left but Santa's Workshop, June through August. Frontier towns gone, the antique stagecoach jounced on a flatbed out of town. When I can't sleep, or I'm trying to stay awake in the car, I slip back into the traffic of children roaming the child-sized streets, floating past their parents on the carousel. I hand-feed the deer. I walk in and out of the fake jail and climb the castle's stucco tower. I don't stay too long. I don't want to end up trapped in a place where childhood never ends. Thank you, Chase Twitchell. That's from his collection, Horses Where the Answers Should Have Been. Robin Fulton, Frontiers. I used to stand at the frontiers of my senses like a customs official paid to look suspicious. Those confessions. In the pale summer dark I meet a tall fir, still in his prime, though his branches are not in perfect order. He's still on duty, but perhaps past caring, having watched too many people like me plundering into the forest with delicate retinue. I pause and look suspiciously at him. I don't confuse myself and the lenient fir. You live too much on your emotions. I know the truth of those analyses. No objection. The forest swallows me up. Thank you, Robin. Fulton. Well, to engage anything, I was thinking, or anyone meaningfully, we must open to it, to them, and we can always open more, surprisingly more, and more wondrously. It's a poem back from New York City. I was living there, which was for a very long time, actually almost 40 years. Opening. Opening like an anemone, like a hand, like a book, like an oyster, like an eye, like a passage, like a seed, like a frontier. Well, not that we need or needed to get granular about an actual horizon, but there are a couple of things I found interesting about them. And I went to Wikipedia just in case there was something interesting. The horizon is the apparent curve that separates the surface of a celestial body from its sky when viewed from the perspective of an observer on or near the surface of the relevant body. At many locations, this line is obscured by terrain, and on Earth it can also be obscured by life forms such as trees or human constructs like buildings. The resulting intersection of these obstructions is called the visible horizon. On Earth, when looking at a sea from a shore, the part of the sea closest to the horizon is called the offing. The higher the observer's eyes are from sea level, the farther away the horizon is from the observer. And the word itself is derived from the Greek, which means, I can't say this in Greek today, anyone, horizonkykelos. It means separating circle. How about that? Separating circle. Well, we do live, don't we, facing, meeting, and ruminating on so many horizons. And that ones that can alter over time, and that we see from many shifting angles as we go along. Horizons literal to emotional to ethereal, such as horizons of nature, landscapes, seascapes, starscapes. Horizons of time, of memory, of our minds, our consciousness, our imaginations, horizons of our hopes, our dreams, our longings, our seekings, the horizon of our heart, our emotional frontiers, the horizon of our becoming, maybe toward a more fully realized or embodied or expressed self, or becoming more fully seen, heard, felt in the world for who you really are. The horizon at our birth, an expanse where everything, every possibility begins. The open horizon of our childhood, the horizon line of our physical lifespan, an unknown finish line for each of us. Or next point of beginning line. And what lies beyond that mysterious horizon, what we can only ever, I say at best, distantly see, only unverifiably contemplate. And collectively, what's over the horizon of our humanity, the world's future, our future as a current society, and that of generations yet to come. As I was saying at the opening, I believe it's one of radical transformation. I do think so. Well, we're going to find out. We're on the ride together in a way, journey together. So we'll go on around these groupings. And we'll come to the horizons of longing. So C.S. Lewis, the philosopher, the modern mystic, and Narnia creator, on what we long for in our existential longing. This is from his book, The Weight of Glory. This goes back to, I believe, 1941. I just have a slice of that I wanted to share with you. It seems so fitting to our theme. This desire for our own far-off country is the secret which hurts so much that you take your revenge on it by calling it names like nostalgia and romanticism and adolescence. The secret also which pierces with such sweetness that when, in very intimate conversation, the mention of it becomes imminent, we grow awkward and affect to laugh at ourselves. The secret we cannot hide and cannot tell, though we desire to do both. We cannot tell it because it is a desire for something that has never actually appeared in our experience. We cannot hide it because our experience is constantly suggesting it, and we betray ourselves like lovers at the mention of a name. Our commonest expedient is to call it beauty and behave as if that had settled the matter. Wordsworth's expedient was to identify it with certain moments in his own past, but all this is a cheat. If Wordsworth had gone back to those moments in the past, he would have not found the thing itself, but only the reminder of it. What he remembered would turn out to be itself a remembering. For they are not the thing itself, they are only the scent of a flower we have not found, the echo of a tune we have not heard, news from a country we have never visited. Behind the cotton wool is hidden the pattern. The whole world is a work of art. There is no Shakespeare, no Beethoven, no God. We are the words. We are the music. We are the thing itself. Thank you, C.S. Lewis. And then from Susan Cain, C-A-I-N, her book, you may have read it, Bitter Sweet, How Sorrow and Longing Make Us Whole. And in there, I liked what she had to say. Longing is momentum in disguise. It's active, not passive, touched with the creative, the tender, and the divine. We long for something or someone. We reach for it, move toward it. The word longing derives from the Old English langian, meaning to grow long, and the German langen, to reach, to extend. The word yearning is linguistically associated with hunger and thirst, but also desire. In Hebrew, it comes from the same root as the word for passion. The place you suffer, in other words, is the same place you care profoundly. Care enough to act. Good book, a good read. Berryman by W.S. Merwin. I will tell you what he told me in the years just after the war, as we then called the Second World War. Don't lose your arrogance yet, he said. You can do that when you're older. Lose it too soon, and you may merely replace it with vanity. Just one time he suggested changing the usual order of the same words in a line of verse. Why point out a thing twice? He suggested I pray to the muse, get down on my knees and pray right there in the corner, and he said he meant it literally. It was in the days before the beard and the drink, but he was deep in tides of his own through which he sailed, chin sideways and head tilted like a tacking sloop. He was far older than the dates allowed for. Much older than I was he. He was in his 30s. He snapped down his nose with an accent I think he had affected in England. As for publishing, he advised me to paper my wall with rejection slips. His lips and the bones of his long fingers trembled with the vehemence of his views about poetry. He said the great presence that permitted everything and transmuted it in poetry was passion. Passion was genius, and he praised movement and invention. I had hardly begun to read. I asked, how can you ever be sure that what you write is really any good at all? And he said, you can't. You can't. You can never be sure. You die without knowing whether anything you wrote was any good. If you have to be sure, don't write. Berryman, about the poet Berryman. Thank you, W.S. Merwin. That's from his collection, Migration. I'm extra thirsty tonight. Lost in Plain Sight by Peter Schneider. Somewhere recently I lost my short-term memory. It was there, and then it moved like the flash of a red fox along a line fence. My short-term memory has no address but here, no time but now. It is a straight man waiting to speak to fill in empty space with name, date, trivia, punchline, and then it fails to show. It is lost, hiding somewhere out back, a dried ragweed stalk on the Kansas prairie, holding the shadow of its life against a January wind. How am I to go on? I wake up 100 times a day. Who am I waiting for? What am I looking for? Why do I have this empty cup on the porch or in the yard? I greet my neighbor who smiles. I turn a slow, lazy Susan in my mind, looking for some clue, anything to break the spell of being lost in plain sight. Thank you, Peter Schneider. Richard Powers has a novel called Bewilderment, on the otherworldly wonder of our world. He's a marvelous writer, and I just like this line very much in particular for us. Never forget what you were born knowing, that this fluke, single, huge, cross-index thermodynamic experiment of a story that the world has been inventing to tell itself at bedtime is still in embryo. It's not even the outline of a synopsis of notes toward a rough draft yet. Buy the plot sometime. So then, a little grouping around the horizons of nature itself. The beautiful horizons nature gives us, and the happenings on them, and above and below them. This is Double Rainbow by Ravi Shankar. Speeding without destination after dark torrents have poured and been returned at home. The skies above mirror my mood. Windshield wipers knifing through sheets. Back roads slick with pooling. When a shard of cloudlessness opens. Pulling over, cutting the ignition, I unstitch myself from the humid seat, still fuming, to greet a full spectrum of color arcing past the treetops in lockstep with its fainter inverse. Archer's bow, hem of the sun god's coat, bridge between worlds, reconciliation and pardon. They don't last. Double Rainbow, Ravi Shankar, from his collection Deepening Groove. Well, you know, I often like to ask more than a few questions here and there, so here's a handful to pose and for you to ponder. What are your horizon lines right now of your inner self, of your outer life? Are they quite different or more visible or more important than they used to be? And if so, how and why? What kinds of natural horizons, like Ravi Shankar talking about the rainbow, have moved you, stirred your senses or feelings greatly? What are some of your deep longings, your deep wonderings? Do you have some compelling life-seeking you're doing, life quest you're on that you're pointing yourself to in the distance? If so, what is that? What is your holy grail that you're after? What frontiers of the heart are you exploring, or crossing, or wanting to, for yourself or with another? How do you or would you describe the horizon line separating your physical life with any dimension beyond? What feelings come up around this? Do you see a clear horizon for humanity, for our world, society, from where we stand now? If so, what is it? If not, what would you like it to be? And how could you in some way in your daily life contribute to that vision coming forth? What horizon is calling you most of all in your days, your nights, your dreams? I'm also curious what felt memories of peace or bliss or beauty arise, involving a horizon somewhere, alone or with someone else. This is back in 2001 on Vieques Island, off the coast of Puerto Rico. Desayuno, breakfast. Behind a thick and overflowing frame of bougainvillea, blending pink, peach, yellow, and violet, we sit in view of the encircling ocean that rounds out to infinity, thinking of Italy, France, the vineyard, of other moments, but beyond all those, of this blissful one, as we breakfast on a bright blue horizon. Desayuno. This is a poem on a wonderful painting by a superb painter friend, Adam Van Doren. His painting, Ocean with Clouds. A sun-gouached frolic. A sky so jolly, flapping with banners of French blue, verdigris. The ocean is bright below the horizon, a sun-gouache frolic of sheep, shadow, salt water, foam. I was talking with one of my brothers the other day, and he said he was on his way to Bainbridge Island, Washington State, lives in L.A. And I said, "Oh, are you going to take the ferry from Seattle to Bainbridge?" He said, "I definitely am." I said, "I have so many wonderful memories of that ferry." It was almost like becoming a kid again in some way, and also just always simply enchanting. If you've taken it, you know. And if you haven't, take it sometime if you can. This is the ferry to Bainbridge, Seattle, Washington, April 2000. A frosted cake layered with cars and people, rosetted with gulls, points out toward quiet afternoon islands. Out past the once-sunken clock tower, out past Ivar's and the painted red fireboat at the dock, leaving swirls of celadon and ice-green froth in a widening wake of blue bay, and a skyline that becomes more matchbox as we draw away through a swath of sun and sky on the big white ferry to Bainbridge. The enchantments of horizons, like this moment of mine in Mexico on the Mayan coast one winter, 2001. Maybe you can close your eyes and see it, feel it, or have seen something like it, felt something like it. The night horizon. A heliotroped horizon line dotted with candlelights that glow on the tapered stacks of long ships and large boats floating across the night. From the Inside Passage of Southeast Alaska, July 2009, for the humpback whales, old faithfuls. Geysers on the horizon. Against the far island waterline, pale columns of mist rise and suspend from the fountaining spouts of the wet black humpbacks, breathing out and in for thousands of years. The horizon of our imagination, always worth letting our imaginations loose, I would say, not held to a fixed line of sight, and seeing where it takes us and lights us up. You know, as you know me, if those who do as a poet of the living world especially, I do it constantly and sometimes playfully, as here. Once upon a time. Once upon a time, the moon rose to the waterline, but, caught by a great gust of wind, instead of rising, rolled right across the horizon to the surprise of all the fish and fishermen, like a glowing bowling ball. Once upon a time. This poem, Into the Wild Blue Wonder, was for Sweden's Magic Blue and its team. This was part of a whole body of work, visual, written, spoken, and musically composed that I put together for the America's Cup in 2017 in Bermuda as the Poet Laureate of the Truce Foundation of the United States, where I am still gladly serving, and we're now discussing possibly a big poetorial for the Paris Summer Olympics next year. We shall see. Keep you posted. But what about the horizons we dream toward or inspired toward? Those of great vividness, aliveness, freeness. Into the wild blue wonder. Off we go. Into it all. Flying into the wilds of life, the earth. Through blue skies high and wide, flying on the fuel of wonder, on the wings of big dreams, bottomless desires. The ancient Greek Stoic philosopher Seneca spoke of his experience of the aurora borealis. Like a crown encircling the inner part of the fiery sky, there is a recess like the open mouth of a cave. A stretch of the sky seems to have receded, and gaping open displays flames deep down. These all come in many colors. Some are a very intense red, some have a weak pale flame, some have a bright light, some pulsate, some are a uniform yellow with no discharges or rays emerging. The sky is seen to burn, the glow of which is occasionally so high it may be seen amongst the stars themselves, sometimes so near the ground that it assumes the form of distant fire. Well, thank you, Seneca. And one of my own dreams, maybe you've been able to see it yourself, but I've always wanted to behold in person the aurora borealis. I have time. May it be so. I had a daydreaming experience once. Another poem I read you from Vieques Island at that same time there, 20-odd years ago, that still glows inside me. I wrote it for the old Hollywood actor, Ronald Colman, one of my great favorites. Lost Horizon. Our wood-spoked umbrella becomes a blue propeller that flies us out to sea and high up over the milky mountains of clouds to Shangri-La. And the title of that refers to the 1937 classic film by Frank Capra, starring Ronald Colman. One of my great favorite films as well. And this is from the 3moviebuffs.com. Lost Horizon, a spectacular adventure tale best enjoyed without too much prior knowledge of its story. So it begins in a small city in China where Robert Conway, high British diplomat, overseeing the evacuation of 90 Westerners as a bloody rebellion is taking place there, winds up on a plane which is hijacked, and they crash land in the snow-covered peaks of the world's tallest mountain range, the Himalayas. Pilot is killed, and they have to survive, and they trek out, and they discover the utopian land of Shangri-La, cut off completely from the outside world where there's no crime or disease and people never grow old. The mysteries are slowly revealed there as we meet its enigmatic inhabitants. It's a place of beauty and high ideals that in appearance is a cross between Mount Olympus and Beverly Hills. I wouldn't say that, but okay, that's amusing. So yeah, if you've never seen it, Lost Horizon, especially when they get to Shangri-La. Okay, the horizon of our world, our society, humanity. So much at play on, above, and below it these days, especially this year already and last year for certain and before. Miller Williams, of history and hope, We have memorized America, how it was born and who we have been and where. In ceremonies and silence, we say the words, telling the stories, singing the old songs. We like the places they take us. Mostly we do. The great and all the anonymous dead are there. We know the sound of all the sounds we brought. The rich taste of it is in our tongues, on our tongues. But where are we going to be and why and who? The disenfranchised dead want to know. We mean to be the people we meant to be and keep on going where we meant to go. But how do we fashion the future? Who can say how, except in the minds of those who will call it now? The children, the children. And how does our garden grow? With waving hands, oh, rarely in a row, and flowering faces, and brambles that we can no longer allow. Who were many people coming together cannot become one people falling apart. Who dreamed for every child an even chance cannot let luck alone turn doorknobs or not. Whose law was never so much of the hand as the head cannot let chaos make its way to the heart. Who have seen learning struggle from teacher to child cannot let ignorance spread itself like rot. We know what we have done and what we have said and how we have grown, degree by slow degree, believing ourselves toward all we have tried to become, just and compassionate, equal, able, and free. All this in the hands of children, eyes already set on a land we can never visit. It isn't there yet. But looking through their eyes, we can see what our long gift to them may come to be. If we can truly remember, they will not forget. How about that poem? He wrote that in 1999, of History and Hope, from his collection, Some Jazz a While. It's in collected poems, so it actually might have been written even earlier. But there you have it. Robinson Jeffers wrote this piece, The World's Wonders. Being now 3 or 4 years more than 60, I have seen strange things in my time. I've seen a merman standing waist deep in the ocean off my rock shore. Unmistakably human and unmistakably a sea beast. He submerged and never came up again. While we stood watching, I do not know what he was, and I have no theory, but this was the least of wonders. I have seen the United States grow up the strongest and wealthiest of nations and swim in the wind over bankruptcy. I have seen Europe for 2,500 years, the crown of the world, become its beggar and cripple. I have seen my people, fooled by ambitious men and a froth of sentiment, waste themselves on 3 wars. None was required, all futile, all grandly victorious. A 4th is forming. I have seen the invention of human flight, a chief desire of man's dreaming heart for 10,000 years, and men have made it the chief of the means of massacre. I have seen the far stars weighed and their distance measured, and the powers that make the atom put into service for what? To kill 500,000 flies? Men, I should say, at one slap. I have also seen doom. You can stand up and struggle or lie down and sleep. You are doomed as Oedipus. A man in civilization grow old, grow fatally, as we say, ill. Courage and the will are bystanders. It is easy to know the beauty of inhuman things, sea, storm, and mountain. It is their soul and their meaning. Humanity has its lesser beauty, impure and painful. We have to harden our hearts to bear it. I have hardened my heart only a little. I have learned that happiness is important, but pain gives importance. The use of tragedy. Lear becomes as tall as the storm he crawls in, and a tortured Jew became God. Thank you, Robinson Jeffers. I believe he wrote that back in the 60s, quite some time back. But how timely that struck me to be now, right now. Some of the things he's talking about. I mentioned at one point the horizon of lifespan, our mortal endings. Crossroads by Louise Gluck. My body, now that we will not be traveling together much longer, I begin to feel a new tenderness toward you, very raw and unfamiliar, like what I remember of love when I was young. Love that was so often foolish in its objectives, but never in its choices, its intensities. Too much demanded in advance, too much that could not be promised. My soul has been so fearful, so violent. Forgive its brutality. As though it were that soul, my hand moves over you cautiously, not wishing to give offense, but eager finally to achieve expression as substance. It is not the earth I will miss. It is you I will miss. Crossroads. Thank you, Louise Gluck. The Print the Whales Make by Marjorie Caesar. You and I on the boat notice the print the whales leave, the huge ring their diving draws for a time on the surface. It is like that when we lose one another. Don't know, can't. But I want to believe when we can no longer walk across a room for a hug, can no longer step into the arms of the other, there will be this, some trace that stays while the great body remains below out of sight. Dark, mammoth shadow, flick of flipper, body of delight, diving deep. Beautiful. Thank you, Marjorie Caesar. Many new poems I brought forward to myself and us tonight. I like to do that as often as I can, and old favorites too. I was musing, gathering material for our show on the horizon of childhood, and there was one or two pieces that touched on that. But how simple and pure and limitless it was for me, and I think for many, and I hope still is for the children in our world, if not always enough, then at least somewhat enough. This is a poem from Bridgehampton, July 1998. Memory of a sea-shaped youth. The ocean dazzles the eye today, sparkling as far as the horizon. The water rushes the shore, regathers itself, waits, and rushes again, each time breathing out an essence of innocence, a bouquet of childhood days at the beach. Bright Day by Stanley Moss. I sing this morning, hello, hello. I proclaim the bright day of the soul. The sun is a good fellow. The devil is a good guy. No deaths today, I know. I live because I live. I do not die because I cannot die. In Tuscan sunlight, Masaccio painted his belief that St. Peter's shadow cured a cripple, gave him back his sight. I've come through 85 summers. I walk in sunlight. In my garden, death questions every root, flowers reply. I know the dark night of the soul does not need God's eye, as a beggar does not need a hand or a bowl. Thank you, Stanley Moss. David White. What I think of as about our horizon of possibility. Mamine. Be infinitesimal under that sky, a creature even the sailing hawk misses, a wraith among the rocks where the mists part slowly. Recall the way mere mortals are overwhelmed by circumstance, how great reputations dissolve with infirmity, and how you, in particular, live a hair's breadth from losing everyone you hold dear. Then look back down the path as if seeing your past, and then south over the hazy blue coast as if present to a wide future. Remember the way you are all possibilities you can see, and how you live best as an appreciator of horizons, whether you reach them or not. Admit that once you have got up from your chair and opened the door, once you have walked out into the clean air toward that edge and taken the path up high beyond the ordinary, you have become the privileged and the pilgrim, the one who will tell this story, and the one coming back from the mountain who helped to make it. Mamine. David White, thank you so much. That's from his collection, River Flow. And now into our last handful of sharings and musings and inquirings. Ha-Jin, a center. You must hold your quiet center, where you do what only you can do. If others call you a maniac or a fool, just let them wag their tongues. If some praise your perseverance, don't feel too happy about it. Only solitude is a lasting friend. You must hold your distant center, Don't move even if earth and heaven quake. If others think you are insignificant, that's because you haven't held on long enough. As long as you stay put year after year, eventually you will find a world beginning to revolve around you. Thank you, Ha-Jin. It's from A Distant Center. Is it time to realign your headline, heart line, your storyline, horizon line, your song line, coastline, your water line, fishing line, plumb line, timeline, your lifelines? Perhaps the world ends here, by Joy Harjo. The world begins at a kitchen table. No matter what, we must eat to live. The gifts of earth are brought and prepared, set on the table. So it has been since creation, and it will go on. We chase chickens or dogs away from it. Babies teethe at the corners. They scrape their knees under it. It is here that children are given instructions on what it means to be human. We make men at it. We make women. At this table we gossip, recall enemies and the ghosts of lovers. Our dreams drink coffee with us as they put their arms around our children. They laugh with us at our poor falling down selves, and as we put ourselves back together once again at the table. This table has been a house in the rain, an umbrella in the sun. Wars have begun and ended at this table. It is the place to hide in the shadow of terror, a place to celebrate the terrible victory. We've given birth on this table and have prepared our parents for burial here. At this table, we sing with joy, with sorrow. We pray of suffering and remorse. We give thanks. Perhaps the world will end at the kitchen table while we are laughing and crying, eating of the last sweet bite. Thank you, Joy Harjo. Yeah, I was thinking metaphorically, of course, as the table itself of that kind is a horizon. Beryl Markham, Markham. She lived from 1902 to 1986, best known as the first person to fly solo across the Atlantic from east to west. And there's a marvelous memoir she wrote in 1942, West with the Night. Don't know it, you might enjoy it. And from there, she talks about how she first fell under the enchantment of the sky as a young student of flight. I saw how a man can be master of a craft and how a craft can be a master of an element. I saw the alchemy of perspective reduce my world and all my other life to grains in a cup. I learned to watch. I learned to wander. I learned what every dreaming child needs to know, that no horizon is so far that you cannot get above it or beyond it. These I learned at once, but most things came harder. Night flying over the charted country by the aid of instruments and radio guidance can still be a lonely business, but to fly in unbroken darkness without even the cold companionship of a pair of earphones or the knowledge that somewhere ahead are lights and life and a well-marked airport is something more than just lonely. It is at times unreal to the point where the existence of other people seems not even a reasonable probability. The hills, the forests, the rocks, and the plains are one with the darkness, and the darkness is infinite. The earth is no more your planet than is a distant star. If a star is shining, the plane is your planet, and you are its sole inhabitant. Thank you, Beryl Markham. From the Tuscan coast, from Forte dei Marmi, October 1997, Sea Cycle. A man rides his bicycle on the sea. Salt rubs the tires. Sun reflects on the soles of his shoes as he pedals over starfish and speckled crabs, under seagulls and threaded clouds, past fishermen and upright bathers, until the pier, where he turns left and follows the sundown over the horizon. Sea Cycle. Would you love to go for such a ride? You can, your imagination. The artist and philosopher Rockwell Kent spoke about our existential wanderlust. It was from his incredible to me World War I journal of quiet adventure in Alaska called Wilderness. Wander where you will over all the world, from every valley, seeking forever new hills calling you to climb them, from every mountaintop farther peaks enticing you, until you stand one day on the last peak on the border of the interminable sea, stopped by the finality of that. And last for now, adventurer. New horizons beckon. Call like the sea calls to the mariner to set sail, to enter the deep, welcoming waters. Calls to you, adventurer, to set a course for the next horizons of self, of life, for the great expanses awaiting your voyaging, for all the wild, uncharted territory inviting your ready exploring. Thank you again so much for leaning in, floating and feeling in. I'm glad to have such an enthusiastic and growing group of listeners. Thank you as well for sharing the shows with others to enjoy and find inspiration in. And for those of you who send affirmations to me, and those also who make gifts of appreciation, donations that do help me carry on creating and presenting these shows to enliven your heart, mind, and spirit, and of others. If there's any uncovered theme you'd like me to shape a program around going forward, send me an email. Always happy to hear from listeners. Colin@thepoetorialist.com. I'd love to know what your experience was of this show on your horizon. To send a contribution, you can by Venmo to Fivefold, FIVEFOLD @pipeline.com, or by PayPal to me at the same address, or by check in regular mail, P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island, 02891, or through my site, thepoetorialist.com, and the Donate tab and a credit or debit card. Yes, patrons can sponsor or host me this year as a working poet in residence in an agreed place in the U.S. or elsewhere to create a new flight of poetic art and dedicate it to them. Email me to explore. Meanwhile, you can hear all the broadcasts online on YouTube on the Floating Poetry playlist. I hope you'll lean in soon again. Until then, dear listeners, keep your eyes, the eyes of your heart, mind, spirit, on all your horizons, while bringing your best and most illuminated selves to the precious moments before you. Goodbye for now, in good spirits.